Welcome everyone to this episode of Insert Topic, and this week's topic we're going to be talking about balls of the material variety. This week I'm joined by James, Josh, and Ben, good friends, fellow material artists. Guys, could you just introduce yourselves so everyone can associate your voice with you?
Hey, I'm James. I'm a texture artist at Quixel/Epic Games.
Hey, I'm Josh Lynch. I'm a principal material artist at Probably Monsters and founder of the Mentor Coalition and Art of Josh Lynch.
And I'm Ben Wilson. I'm material artist at Ubisoft Stockholm.
Guys, it's good to have you all on then. That's all the formalities out of the way. Jesus, that was too serious. You guys good?
Yeah.
I'm good, man.
So, as one thing I'm kind of curious to talk about, all of you have been on the podcast before. I mean, Ben was actually my first guest. James, I've had you on, and Josh, you kind of seem to stay off it.
That's right.
I think it's probably interesting. I think for people everyone at home, because we all know each other. I think it'd be cool to hear how you. I mean, I know you guys through just talking on the podcast and talking on the internet. Unfortunately, I haven't met any of you guys, and I hope to at some point. But so how do you guys know each other? I mean, I guess we'll start with James and Josh, into the top two names on my list. How did you two meet, or how do you know each other?
Yeah, I think I guess as a bit of a student, learning material art and environment art in general, Josh is one of the people I sort of reached out to when it came to material art and stuff. And, he was always giving good feedback, and we sort of just became friends online, I guess you could say. We'd chat a lot about how good IPAs are, and and so we actually met. Josh came to Melbourne for CG Futures, and he did some talks. He did some talks there, and we met up and had a few beers, and it was good. That's really all there was to it, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right, man. Go ahead.
Josh, do you want to explain your issue with IPAs? What do you like about IPAs?
It's like sucking on a plant, man.
I mean, I have to agree. By the way, I have to agree with Josh on this. Jeremy took me to a place we could eat in Stockholm, and I tell you, all they served was IPAs, and I was so upset. It was he's drinking compost.
Yeah, it's tough out here in the U.S., man. I think they're really, really popular for some reason, and so you go out and it's I mean, I like Scottish ales or reds and, something like that, or a little stout, and man, I just don't there's two I think I found that I like. I'll actually buy them if I'm at the store or whatever. But yeah, I just don't like it, man. It's weird. I can't get into it.
So we've got 1-1. I'm going to say I'm impartial. No. We're going to settle this because it's 1-1. I'm impartial because I'm the host. Ben, where do you sit on the IPA debate?
I do actually quite like them, to be honest.
Of course you do.
But,
there we go.
I'm not much of a beer person in general, so I wouldn't be able to tell you kind of which ones in particular I like. But
are you a fruity cider kind of guy?
No, actually.
Oh, God.
But if I'm sort of at a bar and I don't really know the beer list, I'll usually just order a light IPA. But I am actually drinking really bad Heineken at the moment.
Oh God, you really are English.
But it's exceptionally bad.
It is awful. I mean, the only thing worse than I think Heineken's Carlin. It's just the worst. So anyway, IPAs. So we settled it. IPAs are acceptable in this between the materials community that we have here. Ben, how do you know these guys? So Josh and James. I mean, you spoke online and you met at the event in Australia. Ben, how do you know these guys?
I think I know James mostly just through the Discord channel, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And Josh, if I remember correctly, I think you reached out to me on Facebook first, and that kind of started just our conversation, and then that led into I did a mentorship with Josh. And
yeah, that's right.
Oh, really?
I guess since then, we met at GDC. We met when you went to Malmo. I flew down as well.
Yeah, that was really nice of you to come down, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We like toured around a little bit.
Yeah.
Malmo's beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
I'm really like, although I quite like the UK, like when we visited Malmo, I was kind of thinking this is a really cool place to live. Like it's very weird, like in a sense of it's just a very nice place to be. Like when me and Charlotte visited, there's like electric scooters left around and you can like get an app and rent one. And I was like, if this is the UK, these would all be stolen. Like they would not last 2 seconds on the street.
Is that not a thing in the UK?
No, not at all. Ben, you know the UK is nowhere near, not a thing, not at all.
Oh man, what about in the US?
Yeah, they have scooters.
Well, like rentable ones,
people
like
get
on
hurt
the
on
street.
them, man. Oh yeah, like when I lived in LA, they were all over the place. They had the Uber ones, and then I think it was Lime. Is that right? Lime.
Yeah. Lime was the one which were in Malmo.
I mean, I think when you're like in the West Side in LA, like in the kind of the beach cities, they're really nice because you kind of can't park anywhere, right? And so if you want to get around, you just get on one of those. If you don't want to catch an Uber or a Lyft,
they're everywhere here in Stockholm.
They're everywhere in Sweden. They're in Copenhagen as well. When we went there, like they were just absolutely everywhere. One thing though, like I guess it's funny because we've all said like we spoke to each other, I guess, via the internet. I always find it odd, like when you don't realize just how small this industry is when like you speak to a person, like so. For example, you speak to an artist in the industry. It's like, oh yeah, I know that guy, and like we all kind of know each other, not directly through any one another, but we kind of all know each other, and we also know lots of other material and environment artists. It's kind of odd, I guess. I can see what I think about it, like from the outside looking in. I bet it's quite intimidating for a lot of students. You know, all these artists, like they're listening now and they're like, oh god, yeah, they just all know each other and I'm on the outside. It's like that's how it probably feels, right? They're gonna listen to this and be like, yeah, these guys they just all know each other. They're like there's a click and I'm on the outside. Like, it's not the case at all. Like it's a very welcoming community, but I can probably see why it's probably intimidating, right?
The first time that I went to the US, it was with the Torn Banner guys, and it was originally a mod team, and then we kind of formed a company, and we were announcing Age of Chivalry, and there were two people on the team. One worked for Turbine, and the other one was he worked on BioShock. And like I loved these two companies, and I loved these two games. I was like starstruck when I met them, and I was so intimidated, like going to actually meet them because I was just some pleb at uni, and like these guys are industry vets already at that point. But yeah, the thing I kind of realized when I met them is that they're just normal people. And I remember particularly we were crossing the street and we were just having a chat, and I was just like in between the two of them, I was thinking, this is fucking cool. Like completely nerding out.
I think it's
you fanboyed a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it can be quite intimidating for students as well, just in general, like reaching out to people online, like artists that they look up to and things like that. I know when I was sort of learning 3D art, there was a lot of people like Josh that I was like, oh, do I message him? Do I not message him? Because I was like, he's this big shot kind of artist, and I was like a nobody. So I was like, what do I do? But turns out he's all right.
Yeah.
He's all right. He's all right.
I actually, I agree. I remember like when I was a student, I would like shit a brick about, messaging people, but most of them were just really nice, and I think it's all how you reach out to somebody, if you're just like, hey, look at my portfolio, answer these 20 questions. It's like, that's not cool, but if you're just like, hey, and just keep it kind of casual and keep it about the person, that goes a long way, so I think it can be intimidating, but most like we're just people, and a lot of us are nervous too to talk to new people because we don't know what you're after or what you're about, so
I think it's also like there's an etiquette in terms of like approaching somebody randomly, like you said, if you just get, hey, review my portfolio, it's like, okay, dude, not cool for two reasons. A, that's just rude, and B, I can review your portfolio. If you're like, you want to be a materials artist and you have nothing but, like, I don't know what your aspirations are, what you want. And I remember one of the best messages I ever got was someone, they're like, I was at Decagon at the time, and they're like, hey, I really like all your materials you're doing, and I like the props, and I want to work at Decagon. So could you give me some feedback on like how to make myself a better candidate for Decagon? And I was like, that's a good request. I know exactly what you want, and I have some like context to what
Right.
I'm looking at in your portfolio, as opposed to, hey, look at this blank canvas and tell me what you think. You'd be like, where do we just start? Like, I can't frame any critique on that. But speaking of that, though, I suppose let's go trip down memory lane. Like, all of us going to material art, probably different avenues. And I'm really curious to hear how you guys got in. And this is going to be quite a list. This is going to be like one at a time, but I am curious to hear this. And I imagine people at home are probably curious too. So we start with James. How did you end up in material art?
I was doing a bit of like when I was a student, I was doing a bit of like tech art stuff, like a Melon Python stuff in Maya, and that was something that was quite interesting still is quite interesting. But I sort of just picked up, like, we dabbled in, Dido and Endu in college, and eventually I picked up Substance Painter, and I preferred Substance Painter at the time. Because I didn't like the whole Photoshop thing. But I eventually just got into Designer. It was pretty hard to get into because, as you know, it can be quite intimidating to new people with all this node-based sort of procedural stuff. But I sort of got over that initial hump, and I just fell in love with it. And I just never really looked back. It was just something I kept pursuing. So yeah, like eventually I was doing that as a job, and I was still enjoying it, and I sort of started looking at other things like photo scans and all that. So for me, it was just, I tried it and I enjoyed it. Like it wasn't something I knew that I could do as a profession. I just did what I enjoyed, and landed me here.
You went down an interesting path as well, because you were in film for a bit too. Like you got some IMDb credits to your name.
Yeah, it was actually back onto like the whole small world thing. Like I used to work with a guy who was a surface artist at Method, and he was actually the cousin of the art director at Sony Santa Monica. So Josh was there at the same time. So it's like, completely two different industries, but we still have people, we still have connections. And it's really good.
Mm-hmm. That's it. See, you're a master of this segue thing, so that leads to Josh then. Josh, what about you? How did you end up in material art?
Yeah, I think it was like a lot of years in the making. I think I kind of touched on it maybe with you in one of the other podcasts, so I won't spend too much time on it. But I was doing like some prop work at my first job, and I was 3D painting in Mudbox, and I was doing like my gloss specular kind of pass. And one of the artists was like, man, that looks like it's been sitting out in the sun. Like you have a real, knack for making it feel lived in. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like that's awesome. Right. So I just kind of kept on that. And then like every kind of subsequent job, they'd hire me, like Tryon was like a prop artist gig. Raven was, or Molten was in environment art, and then Raven was environment art. But in each of those roles, or at each of those studios, like I would come in as one thing and then kind of slot into materials, and then like the positions finally became available of like full time. And I remember even back at my second job, I knew I wanted that as a full time job. Like I think only Naughty Dog at the time was like the only game studio, but I was like, if they're doing it, somebody else is going to do it soon too. And then now it's more or less everywhere. So I just really followed my passion, I guess, on that.
Nice. And lastly but not least, Benny, how did you get here?
So I was doing environment art. I suppose actually when I was modding, I was doing a fair bit of kind of material network stuff in UDK for Age of Chivalry, and then I actually moved into environment art and stayed with environment art for quite some time. I think it was actually Jeremy who introduced me to Substance Designer, and I immediately fell in love with it because it's very much kind of, it's visual programming, and I really enjoy that kind of thing. So I was doing it largely just as a hobby, outside of work for quite some time. And then I got to a point where I felt like I could actually start doing it at work. And I was at Ubisoft Massive at the time, and it wasn't really a viable option for me at that studio. So the kind of timing frame for this was when I was leaving Massive and going into machine games. I actually then had my mentorship with Josh, and that mentorship was a large part of kind of like, how do I actually, position myself as a material artist? So I got hired as an environment artist at Machine Games, but the role was, more or less material art. I was very much focused on that more than anything else. So yeah, it's something I knew I wanted to do, and actually my mentorship with Josh was largely about how do I make that reality. That's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, I remember
So-
that, dude. Like when you, sorry, when you messaged me and you were like, "Hey, I want to take I was like, "Why the hell do you want to take mentorship with me?" Like, like I didn't understand, right? And then when you explained it to me, I was like, "Oh, that's very cool," and I was like really, really humbled to work on that with you. And then I remember like we worked on that planet. I forget the proper name for it, but I love that, man. It was kind of like a cool hybrid. It would be like half the call was the art, and then the other half was that stuff you just mentioned.
Yeah. I think it was before you did the career coaching as well.
Yes.
So I think it was very much like that's kind of what the mentorship was in the end.
Yeah.
Career coaching. Yeah.
The talk you did, Ben, on the Wolfenstein Manhattan stuff, I think that was a really, really good example of sort of, both environment art and material art and mixing the two. That was an amazing talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, super good, man.
So there's one thing. So I had an opportunity to talk to Sebastian Degui not long ago, and there's a topic we got onto, and I think you guys will be able to speak a lot more to it. And that was about material balls, the map balls, the infamous balls that taunt ArtStation artists, and everyone seems to like
#balls.
So the weird thing about it is so when we were talking about to Sebastian about it, it's kind of like, I mean, material's been around for a long time, long before Substance Designer. Materials were around. We needed tileable materials, but material balls kind of made material art sexy. It gave a tangible image to represent a material and a piece of art, and they've become their own medium altogether. To be honest, because I've seen some really interesting like art pieces where, like, if we were to look at it as a production point of view, it's like, okay, that doesn't belong in production anyway. But it's a piece of art. They're really interesting. Like, and it's kind of like it came to this magic moment where it was the coincidence of map balls becoming popular and Substance Designer really starting to hit AAA. That material art kind of blew up as a medium. Like, I guess what do you guys think about that as an idea that material balls kind of contributed to material art being really, really popular now?
A lot of people, I mean, it's interesting. When I was working in film, a lot of my coworkers didn't understand it. Like I'd be looking at material balls on ArtStation every morning, and these character artists and environment artists are just not understanding what the appeal was. I think obviously, it's a great way to showcase, the reflectance values of materials and things like that. But I guess, at the same time, we can sort of all agree that just having shader balls isn't probably going to get you a job. It didn't for me, my whole portfolio is pretty much just shader balls, but I still had to sort of I did an art test for 3D modeling and did some like environment props and stuff for that to get into the industry. So it's definitely put it's definitely put material art on the map, I guess you could say. But it's, I don't know. I don't think that it's something that should be the focal point or something of your portfolio when it comes to showcasing your materials. I'd rather now see more sort of small environments or something that sort of shows it in context. Yeah.
I mean, Ben, you made a good point because a while back when we first sort of started properly speaking, I got your help on refining my portfolio, and one of the things I was concerned about is I have a lot of these types of materials, these completely not suitable for production materials. And I was like, should I delete them? And you made a really good point. It was about, there's portfolio materials and production materials. And the portfolio materials, although don't suit production, kind of show your mastery over the software. I mean, and I think you're actually, one of your materials is the ones which got me thinking about this. Your metallic kind of architectural piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it was almost, and this is not to sound pretentious, but a piece of art in itself. Remove the tileable material out of the equation. The map board in itself was just a piece of art, of exploring shapes and lighting. I mean, I guess one thing I've been thinking about though, do you think there's an evolution to it? Do we move past? I mean, I saw, I think it might have been Josh or Heli, I can't remember who was joking about it, but the tourist knot. I saw a bunch of tourist knot materials not long ago. And I'm like, oh shit, is this the next step? Is this the next frontier of material art? We're moving to tourist knots?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I actually really like particularly on the thumbnail, I like having the board on the thumbnail. Because for me, it immediately communicates, okay, I know what I'm going to look at. So I quite like that. And I think for most cases, the sphere is just a pretty good way of showing, the specifics of the material. But yeah, as you know, this has been mentioned many times before. It needs to be, if you're actually using your portfolio as a way of applying for work, it needs to be accompanied with proper context. But to go to your point that you mentioned before, about what the timing of was the Substance Designer the driver for the ArtStation boom and giving rise to the role. I actually think it was more to do with PBR, because, and the reason why I say this is because now making materials is that much more involved that it can, in some cases, warrant a dedicated artist working on it, right? And there are, from my experience, there seems to be two kind of broad schools of thought, where you have the group of artists who are I just want to do everything. I want to make my asset and do everything for it. And then there's a group of artists who are I don't want to think about materials. Just give me a smart material and I can just put it on there. I don't care about anything else. And I think that people in the first category have a lot of trouble understanding what the value of the role, because they don't quite realize that there is this other group of people who don't care about, well, obviously they care that the material looks good, but they don't care about the authoring process. They don't enjoy texturing, so they want someone else to offload that work for them. And I think that's where I think that's what gave rise to the role specifically. And as you were saying with the timing of the Substance Designer and ArtStation, I think it really did, all of those really funneled, right, and kind of boomed and gave rise to what we have.
But I mean, with that though, that's essentially, so is talking to Nate last week, and he surprised me because we were talking about Sony Santa Monica, and he's like they'd prefer generalists, which caught me off guard because from the interactions I've had with AAA studios, it's been very much specialists. Everyone wants to be specialists. We need the master of materials, we need the master of weapons, the master of props, of level art, lighting. But that idea of I don't want to be involved in the authoring process of a material. I don't want to be involved in the modeling side of something. You're just essentially allowing, when you go with that route, you're just allowing people to to do what they're best at and not waste time with stuff they struggle with, right? That's all that essentially is when you boil it right down.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
what
I
about the
think
flip side to it though with ArtStation? And I think the best person to comment this would be Josh, because dude is like got the in terms of like the first time I saw that like material balls and seeing these as like a them be popular on ArtStation, you were the first artist I interacted with is seeing this. Why did they blow up? And why do people like them? Like, when you look at, when I speak to people about material balls, I get, so there's two schools of thought. There's those who like them, like the fact they're on ArtStation and think they're just cool. And they're like, okay, they just look cool and I like them. And then there's people who are like, oh, I don't get, people just post material balls to get likes. And I'm like, I see both, I have seen both. And I'm like, okay, people don't just post them to get likes. Like that's.
But is that surely that's not true anymore?
I don't know.
It was not true.
Sorry.
Was it true? Go on, Ed. Okay. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I appreciate that. I want to know what Ben means by what's not true.
That material, you would post materials for likes, because I could see that being a thing maybe a year ago, but it seems now everyone's sort of burnt out on materials, and that they probably will gloss over them on ArtStation. I find it hard to believe that people would be intentionally posting material balls for likes specifically.
I don't think people post the balls for likes. I think people think that they post balls for likes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot to unpack there. Go ahead, Alex.
So where does that start? Like in terms of the mindset. So for me, when I've spoken to artists who have said, all people do is they post it for likes. And I'd say, okay, what makes you say that? And it comes on, well, they just get a bunch of likes on ArtStation. Like they just do it because they get lots of likes. And I'm like, okay, is this born? So for me, I was like, is this born out of envy? Is this just you're annoyed that you post a piece of art? And by the way, I have said this in the past that I don't like the fact that people like material balls on ArtStation. There's a time when I posted an environment, a whole environment, which took like months and months and months of work, and it got X amount of likes. And then I posted a material ball, which I did like over the weekend as like just a bit of enjoyment, and it did really well. And I was like, do people know what they're looking at? And I was very frustrated at the time, and so I can see where the mindset comes from.
I remember talking to you about that on one of our other podcasts. That you that you have like there's like a issue of value associated with the time you put into it or what you think is important versus the amount of attraction, I guess, it gets, right? It's very psychologically weird, and it can be damaging. Like we talked about that at length. Like I went through that. And so you asked like multiple questions. So can we kind of start from the beginning so I can keep track?
Yeah, sure. So where's the best place to start with that?
Out, man. I think like we can start with the timing if that's all right.
Yeah, let's start there.
I think the timing was really interesting. I do think that there is some of it to do. I think a lot of things aligned at once. I think because this is like 6 years ago now, I think. PBR was a big deal. Substance was becoming a big deal, and ArtStation was growing. And I think on a platform like ArtStation like yearns for sexy thumbnails. Like it craves it, right? You like the users that's why they're showing up. You want to see like what's going to pull you into the project, right? Like that's it. So one of the sexiest thumbnails there is like a sphere in a square. Like there's something about it that's really beautiful, And I think that like spheres are like somebody already mentioned it, but they're a great way to show off material definition. You can do tons of different lighting scenarios on it. And I think for me, what's often overlooked with, people are really kind of shitty about it, right? Like they'll say weird things. But I think when you showcase your work really well, it speaks to your ability as an artist, like just flat out, because you could easily not make it look good. You could post a bad render, but if you can make it like a really good render, to me, that means that you have the ability to pull together a final image really well, and you can light it really well and convey a mood. There's value to that. Like if you can't see that just because you think it's a material on a ball, that's on you, in my opinion. Because you need like it's the same thing with a character, right? Like you could post a character, it could be like the best sculpt, but if it's not lit and rendered well, and you know what I mean, framed well, it's
Yeah.
it's no different to me.
But there was a time when I remember, so there's the early adopters, so you, Rogelio,
Sure.
Daniel, Chris Hodgson, and they did really well. Like there was a time when you guys were the only ones in that space, or at least like the only ones who were prominent in that space. And suddenly there was an influx of people, I think, would look into it and going, hey, that did really well. I'm going to post my stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was more down to, they were posting material art anyway. They just hadn't had that formula of the best way to post their materials. They'll post them as a plane or cylinders. And the map ball was kind of like, no, this is the optimal way to show your artwork, to make it
I was
clickable.
big into cylinders for a long time.
Mm.
And then I switched over to spheres. I used to post all three. I did like a rounded cube, a cylinder, and a sphere, and then it just became a sphere or a plane for me, or sometimes a cylinder. You know, but at whatever, you know, at the end of the day, I just like to post it now because I'm having fun again.
Yeah. And actually, something to what Ben, you were just saying about, you know, you think maybe last year versus now there's a difference, and I do actually agree to that, because I think people are becoming more educated, and I think that's the only word I can use, is they're educated as to what they're looking at. So you can't just post a brick wall that's poorly made and get like 200 plus likes. Like people know what they're looking at this point.
Yeah,
they know what designer is that entrenched in like our workflows. Everyone knows how to, you know, do the very basics. So in order to do well, you have to post very good materials like that. You can no longer just post an average material and do really, really well. So although there was a swing at one point, I do think it's corrected itself.
I think the fad was substance designer, and now what's left is, you know, material art. And the people who are interested in material art have stayed. And, you know, like, I think the fact that you get more likes when you post materials is probably largely because your following are more material orientated.
Potentially, yeah.
Like, how many like character art likes do you give versus material art likes, for example?
I think
it's funny you say that though. I try to avoid environment art in general on ArtStation. I don't like looking at it at all.
I think that there was definitely a time, you know, where I'd be on Facebook and you do see some artists sort of just posting something almost every day. And I you know, when I was a student, I was one of those people as well, where it was sort of like quantity over quality, and I sort of ended up having to sort of take a step back. But you know, a lot of my materials were getting likes and all this kind of thing, and that's sort of how I measured success at the time as a student, you know. And as I said, I sort of had to take a step back and go, okay, like I'm getting likes, but that's only because I'm spamming, you know, every day this new material or something like that, and I'm, you know, getting a following on ArtStation. But ultimately, that's not great, you know, like. When I would speak to artists in the industry, if I asked for feedback, say from Josh or Ben or something like that, and I'd say, hey, what do you think of my portfolio? The answer was generally going to be, you need to improve, you know, the materials. You got a lot of stuff there, but it's all sort of, you know, meh. But I think now as well, like with ArtStation sort of getting rid of the cumulative likes and views and stuff like that, it started opening up a bit of a discussion on, you know, not to measure your work by the amount of likes you get. You know, I was seeing more and more stuff on Twitter of people saying, you know, don't go for view counts or likes or, you know, follows or anything like that. Like just work on your art and make sure it's quality. So there's definitely a shift in the way people are sort of, you know, why people are doing art. You know, they're not necessarily doing it for likes anymore, or as much, and it's more, you know, focused on the actual art itself. Yeah.
Did you see? So just out of curiosity, I want to see if you guys do this. Do you pay attention to who's liking your stuff? So I've had that shift where I don't really care about numbers anymore. But if I see like a bunch of artists I admire or I respect, and they're liking my stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, that meant something to me. Like, Josh Lynch or Ben Wilson or James liked my material. I'm like, oh shit, okay, it must be at least somewhat good because them guys are, on a certain level and they've liked it, so it must mean that like, oh, okay, it must be at least okay. Versus, oh, I've had 200 students like something. Okay, I don't really care about okay, not to say I don't care about the 200, but I do pay attention to who's liking stuff. Do you guys do that, or is that just me?
No, I do that. I think in the way. Sorry if I'm out of turn or anything. I don't know if I'm supposed to respond in a certain order.
No. Just talk.
I think, yeah, like I think it's like who likes it, but not. It's not really who, but like what they say. It's kind of what I pay attention to now. Like I did that stylized brick kind of recently, and I was just trying to have fun with something different, and I didn't get a lot of views or likes, but the engagement was strong. The push from people I knew or didn't know to say, hey, this is really cool, you should do more of this, right? Like, you're executing this well, or this aspect you're not executing well, whatever it may be. There's engagement, and I'd rather have that and almost like really low likes or views, but if the engagement is high, whether it's positive or negative, I'm going to learn from it, right? And so I'd rather have that over anything, because that's a signal to me in a big way of like kind of where what I'm doing is like a good thing or not, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Is there do you guys? I don't think things come in fads though. I do really think that. Like, I've been looking into Houdini, and I like played with just generating some rocks. I was like, whatever, I'll just throw some rock, like generate like cliff faces all in Houdini. And I know I've seen Houdini artists at work. I like, it's next level. It's the equivalent of posting a generic concrete material, but I put it online and people really liked it. And I was like, because for me right now, I don't know what you guys do, but like Houdini's kind of the new thing. It's kind of the buzzword that people really like at the moment. And I feel like the community does respond to that. I imagine it's going to go a very similar way to how substance design materials went. Like, you see a lot of it. There's going to be a high saturation of it. And then the quality will eventually outlast it. And it's like, okay, not everyone's going to post Houdini anymore because, like, we've been trained to know what is good and what is bad. Do you actually think that happens, or is that just like perception?
I think it happens, but I want to listen to what the other guys say.
Well, I definitely think it happens as well. But,
is it a bad thing? Or is it a good thing?
I don't know, really. I guess I don't see why it's a bad thing. I mean, really, like, I think with Houdini specifically is that how it gets used in production, at least, is it's not very glamorous. It's like it's a production tool to speed up laborious tasks. It gets used in slightly more interesting ways in VFX and stuff, but for environments, it's generally like, I don't know, place vines here or run cables here. Add edge trims or stuff like this, like really unglamorous stuff.
But so any procedural text are glamorous though, right? Like, because materials is the same. Like, materials in production make like 4 similar tileables that we can like blend together so that it doesn't look tileable. And then tileables tend to be on the simpler side. They're not the big sexy matte balls that we see on. I've said that for the second time on the podcast, but which Josh has reminded me on Facebook. But, we don't.
Yes.
Production isn't like that though, is it? It's kind of weird because the software, like in terms of when we look at ArtStation, and this is something I've thought about for a long time, that ArtStation shows the glamorous side to things. Houdini, Substance Designer, any amounts of things, prop art, especially actually recently. You think you're gonna be able to throw unique 1:1 4K textures on absolutely everything? Like, no, that's not the way production looks. You have to be optimal. We have to do things.
Well, maybe the same thing will happen where there'll be a big kind of boom of people who are interested in just sort of learning the tool because the tool is cool, and then the
Mhm.
people that remain are the ones who are actually interested in that side of tech art.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Ben.
What I do want to get back to, so let's talk about materials again. Let's get back to materials. As material artists, now we all have bugbears. We all have things we like to see in materials. Now, just to give an example of what I mean, like I hate seeing a material where I see slope blur, where I can reverse engineer how you made something. I can see the slope blur,
Yeah.
or I can see the Veronic cracks you've made. I mean, what sort of things do you look? So, let's start with the negatives, I suppose. What sort of things do you spot? What do you see in the material like? God, I wish you did do that, or I wish people would do this. Like, what little things? Because this is probably the most valuable thing. People listening going, oh yeah, Josh says he doesn't like this. Okay, maybe I should bear that in mind and think of a better solution. So this is actually, like, although we're talking about the negative side of it, it's probably going to be the most useful. So what small things do you see in material art that either annoys you or just like you just notice it irks you?
Normal maps on scratches.
No, really?
Yeah,
That?
like when you have scratched metal, and then there's like
Oh.
the big kind of Sobel normal map. Oh, I don't like that.
Okay, that's one. I've not actually heard that one before, so that's an interesting one.
I think
Is it
Josh,
why don't you like that, Ben?
just because it's just not really. It just doesn't look very real.
Gotcha.
So you're talking about like in the normal map, big like hard dents, which are like physical
No,
scratches.
so like if you had some more scratch, less dent. If you think, I don't know, oh god, your typical kind of scratched gun, and then all those scratches have normal maps, like
Oh, right, yeah.
big kind of cuts in the normal map.
You're making me think of the weapon engraving people do on guns, the kill counters. That's like the trope the weapon artists absolutely loathe, kill counters on guns. But what about you two, Josh and James? Like, what things in material art do you spot and you're like, oh, that's a bit of yikes?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, like I agree with both you, Alex and Ben. Alex, I was going to say pretty much the same thing where it comes to things like slope blurs and just, I mean, it's a pretty obvious thing to say about how procedural things look. It's I don't know, it's a difficult one for me. When I see procedural art, I sort of think, you could do that in ZBrush, for example. Like to actually get a really sort of art directed look on your materials. So yeah, for me, it's
sorry. Can I interrupt? Sorry, could you just explain what you mean? Just because I've not heard that term before and I like it, but art directed look. What do you mean?
You're getting a really custom sort of edge breakup on your bricks, for example. You're not just sort of relying on some nodes to, do it for you kind of thing. You can actually like hand sculpt all this stuff or, whatever the case may be, which is what I like. And it's sort of going back to my time in film, I guess, as well. Like, a lot of the time, especially in film where things are sort of, the directors or the producers or whatever have like really, really specific visions. Sometimes procedural wouldn't really cut it. Would have to, hand sculpt or use scans or something like that. So, if something looks procedural, just, fix it, damn it.
Yeah, I think a big thing. Go ahead, Alex.
No. I was about to say. What do you think, Josh?
I mean, I think I make it pretty obvious about slow blur. I mean, I actually really like the node. I guess it's more like because there's different ways to use it, right? Like you can use it in so many different ways, but I think it's the typical like, okay, here's my bricks, and then I'm plugging in a clouds too, and it just has that like that shark tooth looking noise to it, I just think that's kind of like a dead giveaway and I just, yeah, I think it bothers me aesthetically, but also from a user standpoint. Like there's so many other options out there to do better edge chipping. But also, I would say, oh man, I honestly think my biggest, like outside of that, is like just seeing people not sample from scans, like calibrated albedos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mean like when they sample like a photograph with lighting information in there?
Yeah, because like I've seen a lot. People have like pretty damn good control on the height and the normal. You know what I mean? And then I just see this color that's like, whoa, that's kind of weird, you know. And I'm not like, I laugh because I'm like, whoa, it's so weird. Like it's kind of shocking, you know. Like I'm not trying to be mean. I just want people to understand.
Describe weird.
Importance.
Well, what's odd?
Well, it just looks like I'm looking at a photo of a render, or like I'm looking at like the end result of a photo's color, but on a render.
Yeah, so you're lighting it twice.
Right.
Yeah, does that make sense? And it's kind of like I'm in some sort of haunted house, weird playland in my mind, and I can't focus.
I bet there's a lot of people like me, because actually when we went into the mentorship together, Josh, I specifically remember when you were showing me, sample your colors from albedos. And for some reason, I had not thought of that up until that point. And it was just like this giant slap in the face of how did I not think of that? But I bet there's a lot of people who it just never has occurred to them.
Yeah. And so I think like I just want to take it as a moment to be like, I'm not trying to like shit on everybody or something. It's more just to be educational, you know? So just understand that like if that's your path, you really want to go down it, people that are going to be reviewing the portfolio to hire are going to like be looking at that, and they're going to see that.
So we're going to flip this. We've talked about what we don't like. Now let's talk about what we do like. And again, I'll give you as an example. It's something I really love to see is really simple materials that, like I mentioned previously, you can't do simple brick walls, which are done badly and do well on our station. On the flip side, I love seeing brick walls, concrete slabs, like anything that's really simple. But there's like creative ways to solve problems like edge chipping and cracks. I look at it and I go, I don't know how you did that, and it is really interesting to look at for a simple material. So that's something I love to see. Like, what materials on your browser, our station, or portfolios catch your eye?
I agree with that, actually. Like Josh recently did a brick wall, and it's sort of bringing it back to basics in a way, and it was beautiful. So I 100% agree with that. Like, really simple materials are always nicer in a way. Obviously, these really complex materials, they do look awesome. But I think for me, it's more they look great from a technical standpoint. It's not usually something that might be used in production, like this crazy, like Baroque kind of
guilty
insane mech looking thing, like just insane materials. They look great, but from a technical standpoint, I like to see things that are sort of would be used a lot more in production, and a lot of the time they're more simple materials, I would say. The other thing is I like to see people sort of using different techniques, not just using designer. As I said before, things like tilables in ZBrush mixed with photo scans, for example, is a fantastic way of creating really nice materials. I think there's sort of like this consensus around people, or a misconception maybe of material art has to be done in Designer or something like that, which obviously isn't the case. There's still a lot of artists out there that use ZBrush. I know, Alex, you did one recently, which looked cool. There's not any sort of one rule to it. So yeah, people who sort of think outside the box and use what's going to be, the best way to do something for a production purpose. So if it's faster to do it in ZBrush, do it in ZBrush. I really like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in real quick, like just this weekend, I was working with a mentee of mine, and they wanted to work on a leaf thing together, and we were like getting really good with some of the other aspects of it, getting it to sing, but then like the big veins, I guess, or whatever, I don't know the proper term, right? But
Mhm.
and I was like, why don't you, uh, paint them in Photoshop or sample from a photo and just do like get a mask from there, or even use like one of the spline nodes in Designer, to kind of get those veins. And they were of the mindset that like it was probably best to just do it all in Designer. And so it was a really cool opportunity to kind of like, just like James said, like to say like, hey, this is just a tool, and so if it doesn't look good, then turn to another means and use Designer for like how it's going to help you the most at this time, right?
Mm.
And so you could spend like 3 days of production trying to get these veins to look right, or you could just draw them in, or like use a spline tool, and then it's just all the same,
Is, you know what? Because I was of that mindset, and it's actually, and the problem was is also I think there's like, I don't know what to call it, but I'm going to call it ego for now. And it wasn't until Ben phrased it a certain way to me, because I had this issue when Ben was doing a portfolio review for me. He was going through my portfolio and helping me refine it. And you said you actually thought it showed, like, using outside tools shows just how much you understand the software, that you understand its limitations to know when you need to step out of the box and go to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And for, I don't know, that was a trick for me. That was like, that just clicked something in my head to go, oh yeah, I'm actually showing more knowledge by going out of 100% Designer and using outside tools. I know, like, that sounds weird. Like, I needed that trick in my head to make me think it was actually a good thing, not a bad thing, and it took so long for it to fix. But I mean, like I mentioned, Ben, you want to tell me about that. But what about you? What catches your eye when you're looking at material? Because you've got quite broad, like, set materials to do in terms of your portfolio. So this is a curious one for me.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about it as you guys are talking. Honestly, I don't really know. The things like or at least when I'm looking at portfolios for like work as applications, the thing that is most interesting is seeing kind of an environment broken down, and like having a whole sort of section of the kind of the final images dedicated to materials, but how they're being applied. That I find really interesting. But for kind of like just one-off, just showcasing materials, I'm not really sure. The first kind of artist that comes to my mind immediately, who's sort of renders I've always enjoyed, is it Danny Carlone?
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny's awesome, dude.
Like the way he renders stuff is really appealing. I'm not quite sure what it is though.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've been trying to work it out myself. Maybe I should just ask him, because he's the one who. It was actually that James mentioned his ZBrush material. It was like, I've been playing a lot anyway with like using outside software in Designer, using Blender, using ZBrush to sculpt individual elements, and I forgot. I guess like it's really, I've been spending so much time in procedural tech. Being in ZBrush and sculpting again, I was like, I've forgotten how, like, my traditional, quotation, traditional 3D skills, like sculpting, I was like, I was super rusty in. And how quick you can get to a certain result. That was the thing I found interesting. I was like, someone asked me on Twitter, like, oh, which one do you think's best? I was like, well, ZBrush, I got to the end result super quick. But over the course of a production where I've got to do this 100 times and reuse stuff and leverage different elements of materials with each other, I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to turn away from Designer. Like, if I've made a really good rock noise or something, or damage, and I can reuse that 50 times, brilliant. Like, it's hard to turn away from. But them ZBrush schools, man, like, they're just so fucking satisfying. Like, and I don't actually like the final material. I think I just have a thing for grey renders. It's actually Josh's when you do your grey renders of the materials, I think I prefer them just aesthetically to final materials. Just AO just looks so good on
it's clean
any 3D object,
because you're just looking at the structure, really.
So, this is the bit I've been looking forward to the most. I know I've spoken to some of you individually about this, but seeing you guys talk about this, and I'm going to probably take a backwards seat on this bit, but I want to talk about the future of material art. Now, there's a lot of stuff to look at with this. Like, you've got UE5 came around, and suddenly, for me anyway, it launched ZBrush into the limelight. That, what do materials look like in the future? Are we just going to use straight geo? In which case, ZBrush is a very interesting thing. And then also shader complexity. Do we just start making our whole materials and shaders? There's obviously still photo scans involved. But I just want to hear you guys talk about what does material look like? What things are on the horizon that we should look out for? What do you think should be on the horizon? All of that good stuff.
In regards to UE5, after that demo was showcased, you see a lot of people going, oh, you don't have to worry about retopologizing and stuff like that anymore. Just like throw something from ZBrush into a game engine and it's good. But that's not going to happen. I mean, you look at games like Call of Duty that's already 80 gig optimized. You're not going to just throw in sculpts into a game and then, sell it, because you're going to have like a 5 terabyte bloody, video game to download. In Australia, that's not going to happen. So, that's, I think in regards to UE5, I think it's opening up a lot more opportunities for film and VFX. Film studios are already doing a lot of previews and things like that in Unreal and Unity and stuff like that. But obviously, their geo, the amount of geo they can use and all that kind of stuff is limited to fairly low poly compared to what we're used to. So I think that's going to change things a bit, and I think we're going to see more of that. In regards to the future of materials, I think you will see more photo scans being implemented. I think you'll see a lot more people as information becomes more available and hardware becomes more available for this kind of thing. You'll see a lot more people, going out and scanning their own stuff. I think Allegorithmic recently announced their sort of little contraption with HP or something, for photo scanning. And I think you're going to see more of that kind of stuff come about, where hobbyists and amateurs or whatever, and even studios can just go out and really quickly scan something of decent quality. And I think the other thing is AI, whether it's like delighting or AI sort of tiling and removing seams and stuff like that, like stuff you might see in like Art Engine or Artomatics, whatever. I think that's going to become more prevalent as well, because it's fast, and in production that's what kind of matters as well. Getting stuff done fast. But at the same time, with that, like people worry, oh, my job's going to be taken. But I think just job roles will shift a bit. But I don't think they're not going to go anywhere. It's just the way materials are done might shift slowly.
Mm-hmm. I was really excited to get on this topic with you here, James, because one of the big things that I'm like super worried about with this, if like UE5 was to kind of start propagating out into the industry as a whole, is just how the hell do you deal with the file sizes of everything? If suddenly you have to painter files on come up to gigs already, and then if you have to have like 32 8K textures on them, how do you push that through Perforce? And this is the thing is, like, I've only worked in games, so I really have no idea, but film already do this. So how do you guys actually handle the file sizes?
Fast internet, I guess. I don't know. Like it's
working in the scene. Like if you have because painter, it's already a nightmare.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when it comes to geo, a lot of film studios use USD, Universal Scene Description, which is, I think it's Pixar sort of thing. So that helps a lot. You don't have to preview your, 5 million poly can of Coke or whatever. You can sort of just have everything in like proxy level inside Maya and stuff like that. When it comes to texturing, yeah, it's definitely a bit harder. With in regards to things like substance, like it's, you know, it can slow down pretty quick because of the sort of amount of you know, texture sizes we handle. But what I found was we would use other software like Substance for just a really quick base. Like on It 2, the house there, I did a base pass, which was like 4K or something per UDIM on the house itself. But then we took it into Mari and then we, you know, hand painted everything. We upraised it because it could handle it better. Mari sort of has this, you know, you can handle pretty much whatever you throw at it. So I don't know how that's going to look in the future. But yeah.
This would be why I imagine a tech like UE5 not kind of becoming an industry standard is simply because of the production problems it causes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it already takes, you know, years to make a film, and that's when you have a locked camera angle. If you then have to have that same level of detail in a playable space, it's going to balloon the production times.
Definitely.
I think that's stuff we got to look at. I think looking at film is going to be a solution. So just to USD looks like literally the future. The sooner we like everything I've heard about it, I'm just like, we need to adopt this, and it's just a case of big software companies adopting it for games. But the thing that was a tell for me was that demo, the UE5 demo, you look through the artists who got credited, they're all film artists, like texture artists and their sculptors. They were all film people. They all had IMBDs, and I'm like looking through their IMBDs. I'm like, holy shit, this is insane. I'm like, so maybe the solution, like you said, with why you asked James, is in the film, like some of the film pipelines, working out how Mari does handle what you throw at. Some of the stuff I've seen people throw is fucking stupid. Like but it'll blow up my GPU if I open that in Substance Painter. But what about just to the tech side of stuff though? What do you think about like materials being made in shader, not making a bitmap which has to be taken into the engine? Like we actually generate all of this stuff in the shader. Do you think that's something that might be possible?
I don't think it would be fully like. I don't think you're going to get the Substance Designer engine, for example, something equivalent to that running at real time. But I think you're going to get a lot of the look dev happening within the engine, and that there'll be a lot less kind of unique textures, and there's going to be a lot more, engine-driven materials.
So, just on the flip side, though, do you think there's a chance that it doesn't change? Do you think there's a chance that we're going to be where we're at the moment with materials? Obviously, with some shifts here and there, we use simulation stuff, we use some ZBrush sometimes, photo scans, and obviously the procedural stuff in Designer. Like, are we kind of assuming change because of time? Do you think there's a chance that we're just going to stick where we are because we have a pretty good formula as we have it?
Maybe more of the work would move into engine, I'd imagine. But I don't.
Is there anything you're worried about?
Much different, yeah. Because I think it will largely come down to what we spoke about before, where for a lot of people they don't want to think about materials; they want someone there to handle that for them. So whatever form that looks and takes, like that will be what you solve. And yeah, my guess is it will be more in-engine stuff, but your job will be solving that problem. Just give me a material.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of simple stuff, like it already is and kind of should be in production. Because if the answer is pretty clear if you think about it in one way, right? Like if everything is like with respect to Unreal 5 and the demo, right? Like if everything's so geo heavy and a lot of the details in the geo, then the textures need to be simpler. I've already encountered that on different productions where like they have a scan of a rock mesh, then my rock texture needs to be simple because I'm not accounting for facets that's already in the geo,
Mhm.
right? So I don't yeah, I just think it's going to be like pretty simple tilers, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It just depends on the use case too. And not every just because Unreal puts out a thing doesn't mean every studio is going to use Unreal.
Of
Like,
course, yeah.
right? So they're going to, like, some studios might pick and choose different things, but
I mean, look where we're at now. We already have like Star Citizen, like it's an example. Oh, this is all trims, and then we have like and face weight normals. Then you have like any of the LA studios in Naughty Dog or so in Santa Monica, where it's a lot more textured and authored, and it's like we already have variation now. So like to assume it, I'm not gonna. Yeah, it's daft to assume everyone's gonna move into UE5. But does that mean our artistic eye has to, or our artistic understanding, maybe has to adapt? Because I agree with you. I think it like okay. You don't need to have all that faceting in the material because it's already in the mesh. But we have to start to understand, or understand more and appreciate more, like visual rest and balance and
yes.
all of these kinds of things. Which, not to say we don't do now, but I think, I mean, I know for me as a material artist, it's like you want to have these crazy nice materials, but maybe it's like okay, you need to understand that your material may not be seen in isolation. It won't be doing all the heavy lifting. Sometimes it's there to support the geo. Right. That's a mindset shift, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's more or less how it is now, really.
You think?
Yeah, because your material is never. I mean, this is like in a game. Your material isn't on a sphere.
No, of course.
Spheres everywhere.
It'd be a simpler geo. Dude, how good. I said, like, I think, what I'd love to see, like Mario World, like you have the different worlds and they're like little globes. I'm like, them little globes are just tessellated materials, and like that's how you generate like world maps and stuff. Did you see the guy on Twitter, James, who like he got to do bath bomb designs in Designer? Dude, I was like, that's so fucking cool. That blew me away. I was thinking then, like, what? Actually, go on. Like, what other careers do you think might be out there for us? Say, for example, we have like a 70s video game crash where like the market completely implodes on itself and we don't have games anymore, but we want to still do the materials. Where do we go? We've got bath bombs we can design. I saw someone float Pokeballs. Could design Pokeballs for a living. Cool. Where else would we go?
I would be fucked.
I'm sure we'll find some like techie nerdy stuff for you to do, Ben. Like you could do some program. You could just become a full-time programmer. It's fine. Programmers make a killing. You guys make all the money.
I've got zero life skills outside of making games.
You could go work for car companies. Car companies are extra artists.
True, and also you could make wheels in Substance Design. I remember, I think it was is it Daniel who did that? The car rims generator.
Sure.
Was it him? I think it was.
I was thinking more like just the paint itself.
Dude, that's a challenge.
You could design the rim. Why not?
Dude, the paint is a really hard challenge. We had to tackle that at Decagon, and Clinton had to like help us a lot just because there's so much shader stuff. Like I didn't realize how complex car paint is. It is mind-bogglingly difficult.
I think I want to go back to your question about like I don't care about what engine it is, right? But just next gen materials, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I just right now. Everything has the same like look to it. Okay. So like you have your roughness and that's cool, right? You're saying, oh, I have a wood table, they lacquered it and then it's wearing off and it's like got variation in the roughness. But I think like in the core material properties, and this is more of a shader thing, but I want to see more like actual real properties of the materials. Because like you don't have from like jade right now. Like if you need to hook up a shader, it's like expensive, right? Yeah. So I think just that kind of stuff. Plastics look more like plastics because right now the same, like you could throw a fuzz map on a moss or grass, but everything basically has the same reflectance in the shader to keep costs down. So I would love to see
Yeah.
just more real properties, like the slight things that make things look like plastic versus like raw metal, or that's what excites me.
I was talking about this with the guys actually at work today. We were on about is it iridescence rings? I think they called it, the oil slick looking reflections when you get a spec response.
Yep.
And I was asking like, how do we tackle that? And it's like, oh, that's like a shader trick. I'm like, oh shit, okay. So you think maybe going to material out with some of that stuff?
Yeah.
So
but I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, that's definitely that what you just spoke about is definitely a shader thing, right? And I would love to see more of that, but I just think like just the core of a material being like acceptable instead of everything having the same like linear reflectance, if that makes sense. Because like water and ice don't have the same thing as plastic, they just don't.
Yeah,
but you don't account for that in production because you need to keep the cost down, like especially on a shooter right now.
So where does the shift have to happen? Is that in the way we render, or is that to do with our whole approach to generating the materials? Like, where does that idea fit in?
It's just more horsepower and shaders.
Okay.
But I think that's like a lot of subtlety. I don't know who was just talking. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. So with that, are you thinking that's like where, as a material artist, you're going to be paying more attention, or does that start to lean more into it, like a tech artist?
That's what.
Where does
I think the way I'm speaking about it is that just is like what I would love to see.
Right. I see. Okay.
Well, I think that's going to happen, and I think that like data-driven materials where like there's more properties that are closer to how the real world works. So PBR becomes even more PBR.
Yes.
And I think as these properties, as you start needing more properties, you start needing more kind of shader work. I think the roles are going to start merging a little bit. That material artists are going to need to become a little bit more technical.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least speak the same language, where they can say, "I need to do this." Okay, you can have the conversation without having to simplify things.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think though so PBR at the moment, we know the maps: albedo, roughness, normal, AO, metallic. Do you think we could see a shift where it's like, okay, we need extra maps? And obviously there are exceptions where you use other maps, like if you use like a Star Citizen workflow where you have like grunge or clown masks or ID masks. But do you think with the core PBR we could start seeing introductions of new input maps because you have values we need to consider which aren't currently considered?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that like I get all fucking excited about.
That's a bit. I've never. See, this is why I'm glad I got you guys on, because I'm literally like, I haven't ever considered it from that point of view of we just need a few extra maps to allow for more fidelity. Just never really considered it. I've never really even just put any attention or thought into that. And it kind of like what Ben was saying earlier, where like you said about sampling albedos and it felt so obvious. It's like saying that I'm like, yeah, that actually makes things way better.
The other thing too is like the lighting and the rendering's only going to get better. And then at some point, the materials are, if you keep them the same, they're going to start to fall behind and lose their sense of realism. Like people, like the untrained eye might not know or know how to explain it, but it'll just feel off.
Well, it's kind of like what. So Nate was saying last week from Santa Monica, he's not about how why he values tactile density so much. Like to the untrained eye, you can't say why, but it breaks. You just notice it. You're not sure why something looks off. It just does. So I guess this is the next level up. It's like, okay, I know this is plastic. Something this doesn't feel right, and you may not consciously be aware of it, but you kind of That's what makes you just go, I don't believe this image I'm looking at.
Right.
This might be putting people on the spot a little bit. What is there anything like in mind that you'd have like? Okay, I would love to like see this particular thing be like have a map so that we can control it. Because I haven't put any thought into this. I was wondering whether you guys have.
To give you a nice sort of clear, tangible example that could be kind of immediate future is if you take the difference between plastic and skin, the
Okay.
the algorithms that we're using to model skin require subsurface scattering, some kind of subsurface scattering textures to drive the shader.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Whereas plastic, it exhibits a lot of subsurface scattering as well, or enough visible subsurface scattering that it could warrant its own texture. But it's on that threshold where, for most cases, and particularly games, you can get away without it.
Yeah.
If you go look at the assets for I don't know, any of the Lego films, for sure they are using subsurface scattering on their plastics.
Oh yeah, bro.
And
Yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah.
good example because plastic, thin plastic, is on that threshold where, with a little bit more horsepower, maybe we would start using skin shaders on them.
But is that odd? Like that we have we have metallic maps. Is this object metallic? Yes or no? It seems odd now. Thinking about that, we don't like that. That kind of attention wasn't put on subsurface. Like most things, even if it's just on or off, we have metallic, which is just black and white. Then the subsurface scattering doesn't get used as much. Where we just go, okay, even if it's black as an input map, like it's everything holds light and transfers the light in some way.
Yeah.
Like whether there's not at all or not. Like is that the first kind of like baby step? Okay, we don't just use subsurface on rare occasions. Like it is kind of a staple in every material. We need to know, yes or no, is this material using subsurface? Yes. How much? Where? What's the
Yeah, I think you would
is
see
that the next
that.
step?
It's kind of like when PBR came out and they had the don't nod material charts, and everybody was like, "Oh, I need to sample from this chart because I don't know what the hell's going on yet." I think you'll see that for sure.
Actually, what's your thoughts? Every now and then it just rounds on social media about people don't like the PBR workflow compared to the spec gloss because it's an optimization.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about spec gloss. Yeah.
So I have seen examples where that the spec gloss allows for color values in the spec responses, which is why there's that sort of thing, and that leads to what I was speaking about earlier. The spec response with the iridescence rings. What so you say you want to get into that? What makes you say that?
Because it's better.
It is? Yeah. Go on, explain.
I mean, yeah, you get more nuance, right? I get it from a production standpoint. You you want to clamp it down, right? You have so many characters on the screen, things add up. Like I get it, but I feel like you get more nuance. You can I think it's not how do I say this? I think metallic roughness is a better way to keep artists quote in line, right? And they can't break stuff as easy, but spec gloss is a little more opened up for that. But if you have a dedicated material team, I think that's the superior workflow. Like we had that. I've worked on productions where we had that, and I it's not 80% better, but I like it, man, because I can dial it in just a little bit. Shout out Sebastian.
Ben, James, thoughts on spec gloss?
We used it for Wolfenstein, and I also prefer it.
Okay.
Oh, you guys had it on Wolfenstein?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Interesting. I didn't know. Have you ever said that? I don't remember.
Because that's an id Tech, right, Ben? If that's acceptable to ask.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, well, working in film, I would actually work in a metalness workflow that would, in the shader, would convert everything in V-Ray to spec.
That happens in almost every PBR implementation, as far as I'm aware.
All right. Okay. Cool.
So does that mean then? You think then? Okay, let's get back to the future then. Do you think some steps that may come up for material artists is we're talking about subsurface scattering. That's one which we already have right now. That would be nice to have on more materials where it's not just driven by we have a special case for it. A step forward, if we're going to think about the evolution of the PBR workflow, would be something where we actually you bring back some of the things of spec gloss, where you have two maps dictating the spec response, one of them being an RGB map. Like these are the sort of things that you think are on the horizon for material art. Is we're going to be using more maps, and like you said, you give yourself more fidelity to dial in materials. That's the way we think things are probably more tangibly going to go. Again, this is new to me. Like, I've never considered this, and it seems, again, super fucking obvious. And I don't know why
because
it's never come to mind.
you're thinking, right, like, with what's available, and like many of us are like that. You're like, oh well, this is what I work in, right? Like before PBR, you're like, well, I just make my textures, and everybody's doing it this way, and then PBR comes along, and then we all just kind of flow into that. And I think that what you'll see is just more robust shaders, like more realistic, like material properties. Like you'll have, like right now you have like a reflection pass, right? But you might see, oh well, I have reflectivity, and then you have like a like a dual spec shader or like a clear coat, right? To kind of give like that extra layer of like oh my god, like I'm trying to think of a surface, like you have a wooden table, or like even like you have like a like outdoor gear, right? Or some sort of wallet where you need your ID to be visible. You have something behind that, and then you have a plastic on top, right? That you would see the normal of both in real life, but in game engines right now, the top layer, that plastic where the ID covers or sits behind, you only see that normal map. So you don't see the two materials fully all the time. Does that make sense? I don't know if I fucking make sense. Okay.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
In my mind, I see it all very clearly.
No, so it's like kind of like almost when we do ice and we fake that bump offset where it looks like there's things underneath moving and happening. I'm looking at 3D space, but it's not. The clear code, you say, yeah, it's like the top layer has like the normal information, but the bumps, the lettering stamped into the plastic, I don't see because it's underneath. No, completely get what you mean. Yeah, that's again like so it's the complexity of the inputs that make our materials will go up.
Yeah, like right now, I feel like we're on like PBR light.
Okay, yeah, that's a nice.
You like that little six-pack PBR light?
Oh, dude,
not IPA though.
Look, okay.
Not IPA.
Look, you can tolerate. I can tolerate shit talking IPAs, but I'm not going to condone light being acceptable. Light beers have no place. I'm sorry, I can't handle that.
Yeah, so we got to go to like full PBR, right?
Yeah. So okay, so what we're going to say is our tasted alcohol will drive the PBR. Okay, exactly. I like that. We should talk to the execs of our studios to use this analogy, and I think they'll believe us. Everyone understands alcohol.
Everybody understands that.
Do you want Bud Light or do you want full Bud? Which one do you want? And they will say full Bud, and you're like, that's what you need to do materials.
Yep.
See, we're changing the world here, guys. This is what we're doing. But I think this is the longest podcast I've done, an hour and a half. Guys, I've really, and especially James, I know it's like 6:30 in the morning there. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on because this has been a blast. For me to nerd out with some of my favorite artists and favorite people, and just talk your shop. This has been great. Everyone listening, remember, please like, follow, share, subscribe. Like the more that we share, this stuff gets shared, it's better because all the great information these three have had to share it gets out to more ears. So once again, James, Josh, Ben, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week, guys.